My boss thought humiliating me in front of the entire office was just part of his morning cardio. He would circle the floor with his coffee like a general inspecting troops and stop at my desk as if it were a checkpoint built for public punishment. He'd read my emails aloud in a cartoon voice, turn my metrics into jokes, and finish with his favorite line, delivered to the room like a toast: "This is why I can't trust you with anything important." The laughter that followed was never real, it was frightened air leaving lungs in the safest shape it could find. I learned to keep my face still and my hands steady. I learned to say, "Understood," when I did not understand how a grown man could enjoy cruelty the way other people enjoy pastry. He liked precision in cruelty. If I arrived at 9:01, he dragged a chair into the center of the bullpen and made me explain, minute by minute, where my time had gone. "Pretend we're a client," he'd say, smiling, "sell us on your lateness." If a contractor mislabeled a file, he slammed it on my desk and told me to apologize to the printer for wasting its ink. The first time, people tittered; by the fifth, no one looked up. A woman on the support team once cried quietly at her workstation. He paused at her cubicle, cocked his head, and said, "Is this a productivity leak?" and walked away while she tried to erase evidence of water with a palm. I swallowed the guilt of doing nothing until it turned to something harder than shame. I considered quitting every day that first year. I drafted brave resignations during lunch and rehearsed them in a bathroom stall with the fan on. But quitting felt like offering him a promotion; he would stand taller because I had made space for him to grow. The thought hardened something in me that had gone soft from survival. I didn't want escape. I wanted an ending, cold, clean, undeniable. I wanted him to wake one day to discover that power could evaporate like a puddle under a cruel sun, and I wanted him to watch it happen with both hands empty. I understood late that some men only respect procedure. I would build one that did not include him. So I learned how he moved. I learned his tells and shortcuts, the way he shaved corners off compliance forms and copied paragraphs from proposals he didn't understand. He hid incompetence under volume and charm, and it worked because we let it. I stopped letting it. Every time he lied in a meeting, I wrote the truth afterward and sent it to myself from my personal email with subject lines that looked like grocery lists. Every coaching moment became a digital artifact tucked into folders named for routine things: Q3 snacks, printer drums, floor maps. I bought a recorder that looked like a USB stick and left it in my laptop during stand-ups. I memorized our handbook sections on retaliation the way people memorize lyrics. Evidence recited itself to me as I walked home at night. The day he broke my coffee mug, I stopped feeling sorry and started feeling clinical. The cup was cheap with a chip in the handle; it wasn't the object that mattered but the ritual. He knocked it off the desk while miming a clumsy version of me and asked a client on speaker to hold while he cleaned up yet another mess. I remember the surreal lightness in my hands as I swept shards into a dustpan. Detachment is a strange gift; it lets you examine horror as if it were a diagram. He watched me bend. I watched him become a case file. He hated paperwork, which meant he delegated it to whoever feared him least that day. That was my opening. I volunteered for every tedious compliance task and learned the routes our approvals took through the company. I learned how vendor audits were triggered, how travel receipts were reconciled, what language legal considered material misrepresentation. I did not forge or invent. I gathered. Predators are most comfortable when everyone around them moves noisily. I stayed quiet and let paper do the walking. The first file I pushed to HR was small enough to ignore. A handful of emails where he instructed me to backdate a client call so the quarterly report reflected outreach we hadn't made. I submitted it through the anonymous portal with citations and a time-stamped audio snippet of him joking about tidying the past. HR thanked the anonymous reporter and promised review. He returned from lunch with the director smirking, "They love me. Don't forget that." I didn't. I wasn't trying to be loved. I was building a floor no performance could burn. He grew bolder after being reassured. He denied a junior analyst's reimbursement because your face is not a business expense. He rewrote a vendor clause so late delivery penalties would hit our team's budget, then blamed us when the vendor missed a date. He liked being both arsonist and fire marshal. I made copies. I backed up drive folders to encrypted storage. I printed nothing. If you carry the blade in your mouth, no one checks your pockets. Leah, a quiet senior on the operations team, was the first to trust me. She waited until the elevator doors closed and confessed in one breath. He had pinned her exit interview request for a competitor to the team's Slack and made everyone vote on whether she was worth keeping. People reacted with emojis because emojis are safer than compassion. She never reported it. I asked for the date and time and told her I had a recording of the meeting after, where he congratulated the democracy of his management style. She stared at me like a window had opened in a room she didn't know had air. Pain makes conspirators, evidence makes witnesses. When I finally moved, I moved without sound. I packaged everything like a quarterly, structured, orderly, dull-looking. My cover memo had page numbers and cross-references. I didn't describe how he yelled or how it felt to bend. Feelings are easy to dismiss, spreadsheets are not. I attached audio and transcripts, screenshots with hashes, metadata, internal policy citations, and a color-coded timeline of incidents linked to corroboration. I sent it to HR, legal, and, most importantly, the external ethics hotline whose address lives politely at the bottom of every policy document. Then I closed my laptop, washed my hands, and waited. He sensed climate, not weather. The air changed around him and he didn't know why. People stopped laughing in meetings. The regional director arrived without notice. Legal asked for a quick clarification about a budget note he had altered 6 months earlier. He swaggered through the questions, offended at implication, insulted that anyone would cross-examine him in his own theater. Back in the bullpen he clapped his hands. Who wants to bet how fast I turn this around? No one answered. Silence is the first draft of a verdict. I did not celebrate. Revenge tastes clean only when you don't lick the spoon too early. I tightened bolts. I helped Leah file her complaint with documentation. I guided 2 former employees through submitting statements to the investigator without exposing themselves to retaliation. I updated the timeline with footnotes. Satisfying, quiet work, the kind you can do with a heartbeat at resting levels. He struck back the way men like him always do, with spectacle. He called a culture reset in the atrium, rented a microphone, and delivered a sermon about excellence while pacing on a temporary stage. He singled me out as a comeback story, said he was proud of my growth, and asked the room to clap. They did, because clapping is easier than thinking. The compliment was camouflage. The next morning he stripped half my accounts and told me I should be grateful for the chance to simplify. I smiled the way a surgeon might before a routine procedure. The ethics firm moved faster than HR ever had. A man with polite shoes and a face like a locked drawer began interviews. He asked plain questions and took careful notes. People who had never raised their eyes above their monitors found themselves talking for 20 minutes. He didn't ask for my feelings, he asked for paths to files. I gave him a map. Before he left, he said, "Anything else I should see?" I slid over a thumb drive labeled with the blandest word I could think of, lighting. When men like my boss want power, they rent lights. When you want truth, you turn them on. You'd think the day they suspended him would be loud. It wasn't. Security came at 10:12 on a Wednesday with a quiet that made you check your watch. He was in the middle of telling a client how lean we had become thanks to his leadership. They waited until he finished the sentence. He looked from one face to another as if reading a language he had once known and couldn't recall. They asked him to step into a conference room. He laughed and asked if it was a prank. It was not. He returned 20 minutes later with a cardboard box he'd packed himself, a kindness disguised as dignity. He searched the floor for a friendly face and found none. When his gaze hit mine, something complicated traveled across his features: recognition, accusation, a plea he couldn't voice without admitting what we both knew. I didn't nod. Mercy is a currency, he had been debt collecting for years. I chose to spend nothing. Suspension is a hallway, not a door. The external report triggered a regulatory review because of contract falsifications buried in his tidying. Our largest client received an interim summary and replied with the phrase that changes weather systems: "We are evaluating termination for cause." He called me from his personal number that weekend. I let it ring and sent one text: "Do not contact me again." He responded with a paragraph about loyalty and opportunity. I archived it with a note: "Attempted contact post-suspension." HR held a listening session the next week. Real questions slipped out of real mouths for the first time in years. Why were complaints ignored? Why did turnover spike on his teams? Why did high performers leave? The director tried to answer without saying anything, but placeholder sentences don't hold weight once a room knows how much things weigh. Someone asked if anyone wanted to speak to specific harm. Leah raised her hand. She did not cry. She told the slack pole story and how she learned to mute her laughter before it reached her throat. When she finished, no one clapped. Respect does not need applause to confirm itself. They fired him for conduct inconsistent with company values, a memo so sanitized it could have been about a broken coffee machine. He posted on LinkedIn about growth and new horizons, and a few sycophants commented about his vision. I didn't reply. I was busy with the part of revenge most people skip, the aftermath that makes recurrence mathematically inconvenient. I sent the public case summary to 2 industry newsletters that specialize in compliance failures. They don't write gossip. They write footnotes that stick to resumes like barnacles. A month later, an envelope arrived at my home address with a law firm's return label. Inside was a copy of a settlement he reached with one of the complainants. Amount redacted, terms not, mandated training, a multi-year ban on managerial roles at any vendor we use, and a clause requiring a written apology. I don't know if he wrote it himself. Somewhere on a server is a PDF where the man who made me pick pages off the carpet begins with, "I am sorry." I stood in my kitchen and read that line again and again until the words lost sound and became weight. I saw him once on the sidewalk by the courthouse. He looked smaller, as if gravity had remembered him. He didn't see me until we were close enough to perform that awkward 2-person dance of politeness. Recognition crossed his face like a fast cloud. He opened his mouth, found no script, and closed it. He said my name. I said nothing. The moment stretched until it snapped, he stepped aside, and I walked through the space he left. Power is not a shout. Sometimes it's a footfall that does not hesitate. There were people who thought I went too far. There always are, people who mistake heat for harshness and paperwork for vengeance. I didn't argue. I wasn't trying to convince a jury that humiliation is theft. I already had the only verdict that mattered: he would not do it again here. If he found another stage, it would be without our power cords, and anyone who looked him up would see the fine print below his name. The team changed in ways I didn't expect. We started correcting each other in meetings without apology. "I think the numbers say something different," a junior would say, and instead of bristling, we would look. When deadlines slipped, we named the slip instead of naming a scapegoat. People wrote boundaries on calendars: deep work, do not disturb, no meeting Fridays, peer review first. The work did not slow, it improved. Excellence does not need a bully to hold a megaphone, it needs room to be ordinary without fear. On the anniversary of my first recording, I opened the folder and scrolled the file names. Atrium / sermon. Wave. Backdate / joke. M4A. Mug / smash / transcript. Docs. I didn't press play. There is grace in refusing to re-injure yourself with memories of old injuries. Ledgers exist to be closed. I clicked out and watered the small plant on my desk that refuses to die even when forgotten. It leaned toward the window without asking permission. He tried a public return. Of course he did. He wrote an essay about resilience and second chances with stock photos of sunrises. People liked it. People always like redemption when it is spelled without receipts. A reporter asked if I wanted to comment. The record is public, I said. She asked if I believed in forgiveness. I believe in consequences that make forgiveness unnecessary, I answered, and hung up before she could extract a sound bite big enough to wear out of context. Sometimes new hires ask what to do if someone like him appears again. I tell them to get clinical. Learn the routes of accountability. Replace adjectives with citations. Save things in plain folders. When someone tries spectacle, dim the lights with documentation. A bully cannot improvise in the dark. They nod, and I watch them write in real ink, not fear. I thought the last piece of him would leave my life when the recruiter called for a back-channel reference. It didn't. The true last piece was smaller. It happened at a team lunch when a junior analyst knocked over her water and froze, waiting for the shout. No one shouted. Our manager handed her a napkin and kept talking about timelines. She exhaled a sound so soft only those who used to sit at the far edge of the table could hear it. My hands weren't braced anymore. They were just hands, resting, not anticipating impact. You might want a grand closing image, him alone under a flickering parking lot light, me driving past with a new title and a different laugh. Life rarely gives symmetry on command. It gave me a Monday that felt like a Monday, and a job that was only a job, and a quiet in my chest where a knot used to live. Revenge stories like to end at a courthouse or in an inbox. Mine ends at a dishwasher at 10 p.m., steam fogging my glasses, a plate clean under running water, a breath I didn't have to count. Once, early on, he told me the only thing that mattered was perception. Control perception and you control truth, he said, tapping his temple as if the thought had chosen him for its debut. He was wrong the ordinary way powerful people are wrong. Perception is a costume. Truth is the seam you can't unpick without ruining the outfit. I spent months pressing on those seams until the costume fell apart in the wearer's hands. I didn't cheer when it did. I didn't need to. I had something better than applause, air that belonged to everyone again. The last time his name appeared in my inbox, it was a recruiter asking whether I could clarify a few items. I called and spoke in nouns and verbs. He directed staff to backdate outreach records in violation of policy. He retaliated against complainants. Multiple verified complaints were substantiated by a third-party investigator. He was terminated for cause. Silence, then a low whistle. That's clear, she said. I thanked her for asking and went back to my calendar. At 3 I had a meeting about budgets. We finished early. No one raised their voice. If you are looking for a lesson, I don't have one fit for a poster. I have a ledger. On the left, hours spent being small so a man could feel big. On the right, the minutes it took to say, I have documentation, to someone authorized to care. The difference between them is the interest I live on now. It accrues quietly. It buys lunches for new hires and error margins for honest mistakes and Friday afternoons so calm that the hum of the air conditioner feels like proof of life. I will not send this story to him. He is not the audience. The audience is the person picking papers off a carpet while a room pretends not to see, the person who learned to time their breath to someone else's temper. To you I'll say this, revenge does not have to be loud to be complete. Cold works. Quiet works. Precision works. And when the moment comes, when you turn off the last microphone he forgot he left on, watch the red light fade and know the room is yours again. On his last morning in our building, after security had walked him out and the elevator doors had closed, someone found the rented microphone in a supply closet, still on, still hunting for a signal that would never arrive. They handed it to me because I handle logistics now. I pressed the switch. The little red eye died. The room sounded perfect.